boys and girls, welcome to your second reading lesson of this week. Now, in yesterday's lesson, we talked about studying our characters' relationships with other characters to better understand who our character is. In today's lesson, we're going to go back to something that we've learned about while reading the books about Emma. Remember when we were reading about the chicken Emma? We are going to focus on paying attention to how characters respond to problems. Franny seems to come across quite a few problems, but we want to see how she responds. So as we're reading today, I want you to think about, how does Franny respond? Does she respond in a positive way? Does she respond in a negative way? So our learning target for today is, I can pay attention to how characters respond to problems. Chapter 8. Right when I answered the phone, I saw Mrs. Pellington and my entire class race down the hall to watch me. I felt so much pride that they were running back to see me. They must have not wanted to miss a centimeter of my show. When they reached the window outside the DJ booth, Mrs. Pellington slapped her hands together against the window too. She did it over and over, like people stamp their feet at games when their team is winning. I felt so proud of myself. "Hello?" I said again. I turned to smile at my class just then. The first face I saw was Elliot's. He breathed glass on the window, and his finger wrote, "Wow!" I was wowing everyone, even Elliot, and he is very hard to wow. Then Mrs. Pellington tried so hard to come into the studio to be a part of the action, but she couldn't get the door open. She motioned to Millicent, who was reading. Millicent was going to get in big trouble now because she was reading and not paying attention. A woman's voice said, "Hi, is this the Sandy Sanders show?" "Yes," I answered proudly. "But you're not Mr. Sanders." "No, I'm Mrs. Frankly B. Miller. I'm taking over for Mr. Sanders. Do you have a question?" "Ah, okay. Well, Mrs. Miller, I do have a question, and I'm hoping you will help me with it." That was my chance to say the thing Mr. Sanders always says. I'll give it my best shot. I was really good at this. My husband and I are having a little disagreement. He says the polls at Chester Elementary are open until 8 p.m. tonight, but I think they close at 5 p.m. like the post office. Who's right? I could not believe my luck. Someone was asking me the most adult question I've ever been asked in my entire life. I wanted to memorize the feeling and tell it to my parents, and their parents, and their parents' parents, and everyone's parents. I looked over at Mrs. Pellington, whom I imagined was thinking how much I'd grown up since the Cambridge magazine visit. "Do you think that Franny knows what she's doing is wrong? Does it sound like she knows that it's wrong that she jumped on the radio show when she wasn't supposed to?" Mrs. Pellington was holding one hand to her chest and the other to her mouth. It is a scientific fact that people do this when they are really happy that someone is saving the day. It was a good thing that I was also good at doing two things at once. I was very good at daydreaming and listening at the same time, which is how I remembered that Mrs. Pellington said that thing about how elections wouldn't be at our school anymore. "Well, actually, you are both wrong," I said. I couldn't believe my own ears. I was telling one adult that she and another adult were wrong, and I wasn't even getting in trouble for it. "What do you mean?" the woman asked. "The election moved. It's not even at Chester Elementary School. It's somewhere else." "Somewhere else? Well, where?" I squinched my brain to try and remember where Mrs. P said all the elections would be. And then I remembered. "The local theater," I said. "You mean the Morristown Playhouse?" "Yes, the Morristown Playhouse. That's the local theater." "But that's in Morristown." "Well, they don't have voting in schools anymore. It's a new rule. You can only vote in local theaters, so everyone has to go to Morristown Playhouse if they want to vote." The strangest thing is that when I said these words, they didn't even make a lot of sense, not even to my own two ears. But I was saying exactly the words Mrs. Pellington said, so they had to be true. Then an even stranger thing happened. I heard voices talking in my headphones, and they weren't my voices. "Bob, call Victoria. Get her down here now," said one man's voice. Little girl, can you hear me? Get off the mic. Get off the mic," said a woman's voice. A different man said, "Steve, Victoria doesn't have the master key. Get Sandy, he's got a copy, or get a janitor." I did not understand the code words of radio station people, but I would make sure to ask them what everything meant later. Now there were several people at the door trying to open it. People were trying all different keys. That's how much they wanted to come and watch me. I looked over at Millicent with the biggest grin that my face ever invented. And that was the exact moment she reached the last page in her book and looked up. Mrs. P motioned for her to open the door. "It's locked," Millicent called, confused. When I looked over at the door, I saw the janitors searching their giant keychains for the right key. Even they wanted to personally congratulate me. And then Mr. Sanders came back. Sometimes after being upset with my parents, I come downstairs to let them know I'm feeling better. I guess that's what Mr. Sanders is doing right now. I wonder if it was a good time to give him my resume. Just then, I looked down, and not just one line was blinking red for me, but all the lines were blinking red for me. I felt more important than a doctor. As I went to share another call, a high-pitched screech came through the headphones. It was so loud that it hurt, and I had to throw my headphones off. When I put the headphones back on, there was no sound. I thought for at least 1 centimeter of a second that I was deaf. I tried talking into the microphone and was very relieved when I heard my own voice. What I did not hear, though, was my own voice in the headphones like I did before. The microphone didn't make my voice sound louder than it was. That's when I got a really bad feeling. I wished and hoped for one thing, and that was that I didn't break the radio station. So, what do you think now? Do you think Franny thinks she did something wrong? She thinks that she might have broken the radio station, but do you think that she knows that she wasn't supposed to be on the radio show still? No, it doesn't seem like that. It just seems like she feels like she had accidentally broken the radio. Let's keep reading. Chapter 9. At just the instant that I wondered whether I broke the radio station, the janitors opened the door, but the only person to rush in was Mr. Sanders. He ran toward me. I thought he was going to shake my hand or hug me or ask for my business card, but he didn't do any of those things. What he did, actually, was lift me up out of my seat and put me down right next to Millicent. Then he sat where I was sitting and put the headphones back on his head. He started pushing buttons and pulling levers. He didn't seem happy like I thought he'd be. I decided to wait and give him my resume later. Then Mrs. Pellington came rushing in saying, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." What was she apologizing for? There was a lot more yelling back and forth. Mr. Sanders was yelling about circuits to the engineers, and the engineers were yelling about kids today. And then Tuesday, the tour guide came rushing in with a really red face. She told us to hurry up and get out. We were all so confused. We had only been there for 45 minutes, and we were supposed to be there for 3 entire hours. Drew started to complain that he didn't even get to see us as much as I thought. Then everyone, except Elliot, Elizabeth, and Millicent, complained that they didn't get to see anything either. Mrs. Pellington was grabbing at her hands and looked more worried than I'd ever seen her. We didn't know why in the world we were leaving. Going down the elevator wasn't as exciting as coming up. Passing all the important people and going through the turnstiles and saying goodbye in security wasn't as much fun. Instead, everything felt bad, like I had done something really wrong. So we're talking about how our character responds to problems. How do you think Franny is responding to this problem that she caused? Continue to think about that as we read. Did I have another Cambridge magazine accident? No, it couldn't be that. I didn't spill anything on any originals. I didn't even see any originals to spill on. I was just trying to help Mr. Sanders. We all stood crowded on the street, but our school bus wasn't there. "We're not supposed to be finished for another 2 hours," said Mrs. Pellington, who sounded very worried. Then she started to dial her cell phone like crazy. All my classmates surrounded me to ask a bajillion questions about what it feels like to be on the radio. There was no way I could actually answer all of them. That's how many there were. I felt like a movie star. It was only when I realized their questions were getting harder to hear that I began to notice all the cars honking. The honking was really bad. And when I looked up, I saw the hugest traffic jam in the existence of the planet. Drivers were getting out of their cars and yelling at one another. Why do you guys think they're in such a traffic jam? We'll have to see. Other drivers were hanging out of their windows, waving their fists in the air. I wondered if something really bad had happened. I really hoped not. Mrs. Pellington was talking to people who worked in the lobby, and all they did was shrug at her. Even when she said in her very worried voice, "We're going to be stuck here forever." But we weren't stuck there forever. Even though it took a long time, a bus finally came to pick us up. There was so much traffic that we didn't even move a centimeter for a really long time. In that really long time, Mrs. P said she was too angry to speak and that we would discuss this fiasco at our class meeting tomorrow. So if you can see, it looks like there's some people yelling at each other in the traffic jam, and there's the bus. And that is the end of chapter 9 and where we're going to stop. Remember, we are thinking about how Franny is responding to problems. First of all, what was the problem? Yeah, the problem was that Franny went onto the radio show when she wasn't supposed to. So how did she respond to this problem? Do you think she responded how you might have responded? After listening to this really intense 2 chapters of Frankly Franny, you're going to write down the problem and Franny's response to the problem on your graphic organizer. Now, I just gave you the problem, so that one should be easy, but I want you to think about Franny's response to the problem. I hope you have a wonderful day, stay safe and healthy, and I will see you tomorrow where we will continue reading Franny.